Michael Jackson spent his entire life being chased by one thing: not fame, not scandals, not the media. Fear. And the terrifying part is that the fear didn't come from strangers, paparazzi, or obsessed fans. It came from his own father. Now, when people talk about Michael Jackson, they usually focus on the moonwalk, the music, the surgeries, or the controversies. But if you really want to understand why Michael became the way he did, you have to go all the way back to a small house in Gary, Indiana, where a little boy with an unbelievable voice grew up under a father who believed fear was the same thing as discipline, because Joseph Jackson didn't just create Michael Jackson. In many ways, he also destroyed him. And once you hear the full story, a lot of Michael's life suddenly starts making disturbing sense. Before Michael Jackson became the king of pop, he was just another kid growing up in a crowded working-class home with 8 siblings. The Jackson family didn't have much money, and life inside the house was strict, tense, and heavily controlled by Joseph Jackson, a man who had once dreamed of becoming a successful musician himself. Joseph had played guitar in a local band during his younger years, and like a lot of people with unfinished dreams, he never fully let go of the idea that he was supposed to become somebody important. When that dream failed, he shifted all that ambition onto his children. The Jackson family slowly stopped functioning like a normal family and started functioning more like a business operation. At first, Michael wasn't even the main focus. The older brothers were already rehearsing and performing together, and Joseph mainly saw potential in them. But everything changed the moment Michael started singing. The second Joseph heard that voice, he immediately realized that his youngest son had something different. Not just talent, but the kind of talent that could change the entire family's future. And from that moment on, Michael's childhood was basically over. Most children come home from school and spend their evenings playing outside, watching television, or doing homework. Michael Jackson came home to rehearsals that felt more like military training sessions. The Jackson brothers practiced constantly, and Joseph ruled those rehearsals through fear. He would sit in a chair with a leather belt in his hand while the boys danced and sang for hours. If somebody missed a step, forgot choreography, or hit the wrong note, punishment came immediately. What makes this story especially disturbing is that Michael later admitted rehearsals made him physically nervous because he was constantly afraid of being beaten. Imagine being a child and associating music, the thing that would later make millions of people happy, with fear and survival. But Joseph's damage went far beyond physical punishment. As Michael entered his teenage years and started becoming insecure about his appearance, Joseph repeatedly mocked him for the way he looked, especially his nose. Instead of helping his son through normal teenage insecurity, he constantly insulted him, telling him his nose was too big and making jokes about his face. And honestly, once you know this part of the story, Michael Jackson's later obsession with changing his appearance suddenly feels far less mysterious. People often treat his surgeries like some bizarre celebrity transformation, but imagine hearing from your own father over and over during your teenage years that your face is ugly. At some point, those words stop sounding like insults and start becoming your internal voice. But perhaps the moment that explains their relationship better than anything else happened one night while Michael was asleep. Joseph decided he wanted to teach his son a lesson about leaving windows open. So instead of simply talking to him like a normal parent, he wore a frightening mask, climbed through Michael's bedroom window in the middle of the night, and screamed directly in his face. Michael was terrified, and according to people close to him, he suffered nightmares for years afterward about being kidnapped from his room. Now, maybe Joseph saw this as discipline, but what he actually created was trauma. And the saddest part is that the fear Michael developed as a child never really disappeared. It followed him into adulthood, into fame, and into every stage of his life. By the early 1980s, Michael Jackson was becoming something the world had never seen before. Thriller wasn't just a successful album, it became a cultural explosion. Michael Jackson stopped feeling like a celebrity and started feeling more like a global phenomenon. People fainted at concerts. Streets filled instantly wherever he appeared. Every performance became an international event. For the first time in his life, Michael no longer needed Joseph professionally. He had surpassed the Jackson family itself and become bigger bigger than the entire music industry around him, but emotionally, he was still deeply afraid of his father. Michael later admitted that simply being around Joseph could make him physically sick. Think about how serious that is. This wasn't normal family tension or awkwardness. Michael described genuine fear. Even after becoming the most famous entertainer on earth, he still struggled to directly confront the man who had controlled him since childhood. Eventually, Michael separated professionally from Joseph, but even then, he avoided direct confrontation as much as possible. Lawyers handled many of the conversations because emotionally, Michael still seemed trapped in the same fear he had developed as a child. But Joseph didn't fully lose control. He understood something important about Michael. His emotional weak spot was his mother, Catherine. Michael adored her, and Joseph knew that whenever Michael resisted something, Catherine could emotionally persuade him in ways nobody else could. And that pressure eventually led to one of the darkest turning points in Michael's life. In 1984, Michael signed the now famous Pepsi commercial deal. On paper, it looked like another massive career move. Huge money, huge publicity, huge global exposure. But according to multiple reports, Michael reportedly didn't even want to do it in the first place. Still, pressure from the people around him pushed him into agreeing. Then came the accident. During filming, the pyrotechnics exploded too early, and Michael's hair caught on fire while cameras were rolling. Even now, the footage is difficult to watch because Michael continues performing for several seconds before realizing the severity of what happened. He suffered serious burns to his scalp, and many people close to him believe this moment became the beginning of his dependence on strong painkillers. That dependency would quietly follow him for the rest of his life. What's tragic is that even after such a horrifying accident, the machine around Michael kept moving. More tours, more pressure, more expectations. Joseph then pushed heavily for the Victory Tour involving the Jackson brothers. Michael reportedly didn't want to do it. By this point, he already looked emotionally exhausted from fame itself. But once again, family pressure pulled him back in. The Victory Tour quickly became controversial because of its expensive ticket system, and fans started accusing the Jackson family of greed. Michael hated the criticism because he genuinely cared about how fans viewed him. Then, an 11-year-old girl wrote him a letter explaining she couldn't afford tickets, and according to reports, the letter affected Michael so deeply that he publicly announced he would donate his share of the profits to charity. Joseph was furious because Michael had essentially walked away from millions of dollars. And then came the moment that truly ended Joseph's control. At the final Victory Tour concert, Michael shocked both fans and his family by announcing on stage that this would be his final tour with the Jacksons. To the audience, it sounded emotional and historic, but behind the scenes, it was much bigger than that. This was Michael Jackson publicly separating himself from the system his father had built around him. For the first time in his life, Michael escaped. Ironically, once Michael created distance between himself and Joseph, his career became even bigger. Albums like Bad, Dangerous, and History pushed him into an entirely different level of global fame. But emotionally, something inside Michael always seemed damaged, and honestly, Neverland Ranch explains that damage better than almost anything else in his life. People often mocked Neverland because it looked strange from the outside, but psychologically, it feels far less bizarre when you remember Michael never truly experienced a normal childhood. While other children were playing, he was rehearsing. While other children were building memories with friends, he was performing under pressure. Neverland felt less like a billionaire's playground and more like a grown man trying to recreate the childhood he lost. Even after all his success, Michael still maintained strong boundaries with Joseph. Reports claimed that Joseph was not allowed into Neverland without permission and that security had strict instructions regarding him. Imagine becoming one of the most powerful entertainers in history and still needing emotional distance from your own father. But perhaps the clearest insight into Michael's true feelings came after his death. When Michael Jackson's will became public, people noticed something shocking. Joseph Jackson received nothing. Michael left money to his children, his mother, and charities, but his father was completely excluded from the estate. That decision spoke louder than any interview ever could. To this day, Joseph Jackson defended the way he raised his children. He believed harsh discipline created success, and in terms of results, it's difficult to argue against the outcome. The Jackson family became legendary, and Michael became arguably the most famous entertainer in history. But success came with devastating emotional consequences. When you look closely at Michael Jackson's life, so many things begin connecting back to his childhood: the insecurity, the perfectionism, the obsession with appearance, the emotional loneliness, desperate need for love and acceptance. Even the childlike qualities people often criticized him for suddenly feel tragic rather than strange. Michael Jackson spent his life giving joy to the world, but privately, he often seemed like someone searching for something he never fully received as a child: unconditional love. Not love because he could sing, not love because he could perform, not love because he could make millions of dollars, just love for being Michael. And maybe that's why so many people connected emotionally with him despite all the fame and mystery surrounding his life. Beneath the superstar image, Michael always felt deeply human, fragile, lonely, emotionally wounded in ways success could never fix. And in the end, that may be the greatest tragedy of all. The man who helped create Michael Jackson, the superstar, may also have created many of the wounds that ultimately destroyed Michael Jackson, the person. But Michael Jackson's story becomes even darker after this point, because once the fame reached impossible levels, his life slowly turned into a world filled with paranoia, addiction, betrayal, and isolation. And in the next video, we're diving into Michael Jackson's final years and the people surrounding him before his shocking death. Trust me, once you hear that story, you'll never look at Michael Jackson's life the same way again. If you like our video, then don't forget to subscribe. So see you next time.